And before we get started, we want to thank our major sponsors this year, especially the New Orleans Jazz and Heritage Foundation and the Academy of American Poets, who have helped us keep this year's festival completely free and open to all. We're really glad to see you here at this event and hope to see you at other events through the end of the month, which is Friday. And everything is on the website, as you know. And now I'm going to turn the evening over to Jose-Luis Moctezuma, and he'll be moderating the session and starting it off for the reading. Thank you so much. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Lisa. It's an honor to be here. Thank you, to Bill and Megan and the New Orleans Poetry Festival for hosting this. And also for the freedom to schedule it. It's been an amazing and robust month, especially for Poetry Month in terms of readings and performances, and we're happy to be here with you all. I guess the theme is Codices of Borderlands. I'll start with reading a couple of poems, around 15 minutes or so, 15 to 20, and then I'll pass it on to Steven. Thank you as well. I guess we'll be dropping the bios as we read. So, here we go. All right, I'll start off with some poems from my book, Place Discipline on Omnidawn, and move on to some newer stuff. Okay. Extinction, this is called Omniwaking, by the way, Omniwaking, which is a neologism. Extinction, they say, motivates vernaculars. Aeration, like the rooting of bipeds and speech acts. Univocal, the remonstrances situate our vitals. This is gathering. This is the gathering. Gather you round us. You gather us, the we, in voltifas, the transversal, unto a metric of contagious witnessing we require, that our patrons know whence we emerge, indefinable, like water at the rim, blurry, overt in the shade. Deer says this is the summit of cultures, grass inside, sea unsurrendering. Shaman says, I see Isis crafting Ojibwe from after image, green resin from the three fires. Rasa lives on in the organs they vehicle and sing out of. Our language stretches across lunar loneliness. Reflections in the glass pool tilt menominee toward interface and origin. Craft of some peculiarity indefinable as the grays of mosquito on elk hair in October prism, or rice fields wild in contiguous wind. The Turnvater of the German Athens, still unreckoning of minute curse or scar tissue, what health disregards in algae's blooming fire, the slow death of mitochondria encased in lung. But you gather our continuity in blood's maple wood, these songsters caught up in their own voicings, a few miles out, a few kilos in, the multiple we are, browned by concords we hardly formulate, the districts innumerable and emblazoned in Omniwaking. Okay, this one is called Theta is the first stream. Theta is the 8th letter in the Greek alphabet, signifying resurrection, but death as well, or death, and thus in death, resurrection. And I love the fact that it sounds like data. So theta, data is the first stream. Theta is the first stream in the ear of night. Theta travels on the 808, the metabolic break, the rift in your heart, and resounds in the emptied love songs of the Red Star's refrain. The world annihilates its spectrums and submerges what intelligence we have of color and communal form. Theta is the 8th letter in our entropic. Theta is the first letter in Thanatos. and yet we resist the daedal unbecoming. We resist the lettering of our skins. In Birmingham, public access shall be required. In Chicago, public access shall be required. Class vectors do not mark our bodies. An invisible union besets us in sets theory, the project of enumerating our schemata at the margins of race. No, we are sunken as stone lizards in Ra's gaze. The sun dazes our politic in a mire of twittery dialect. What is mimetic caption and slow violence of glacial melt at daybreak's cataclysm? The mages of harmonic systems trump our urgency, wash out our difference in the mainstream bathwater, normalize what has always been a fracture in the surface level of engagement. And yet we resist the equations of sameness. We surge on the 808. We seek 8 diagrams for the 5th assessment. We call out the entities of marginalia, voices unsurrendering of census bureaus, unseen voices in the desert, white bears in striations of apocalypse. Flood them with your faces, flood them with the wake of your velocity, flood them in Holman Square where the black cube glistens, deform it, untrammel its aesthetics of silence, make no butchery of your conscience, send out waves of you, send out waves of peregrine voices at the porcelain tower, heralded only by night falcons who signal your ascension, your centrifuge. Okay. This is a slightly newer poem called Private Equity. Private Equity. I want to tell you a story about hands that migrated through water and sourced their network of mollusks to the arteries that span out in a blood-and oil, hued in the resin of burned thighs. The buffalo who browned the people with their afterimage once warned us of the hazards of individuation and the perils of detribalization. In the private sector, where we fabricate stories for our therapist about what ails us when the rapture bells turn soft and our alienation is totalized by a loss of consciousness in the spheres of privation and the exfoliant rituals of self-care. The gas flame that burns the kettle is not yours, but private equity. 2 hands that cling are not yours, but private equity. 2 lips that speak are not yours, but private equity. The parliament to the tecolote or the sloth to the bear is no longer theirs, nor the holy mountain its analog, nor its fictions of steady state, but private equity. Trans care and public sphere and private fear are private equity. The flint water that burns from the faucet, the ambulance cars that rummage through the defamed tunnels, the eroded gods stenciled on the walls and paved into the lineal descent of the streets, who watch you and measure you and dim the lights when you speak her lexeme and you sleep, are private equity. In the airport turnstiles, in the prison cafeterias, in the surveillance mesh of self-fashioning, in the human effigies crafted from your 10 names coded in darknet, these too are private equity. At the border, outside the border, inside the border, alongside the border, they speak of Babylonian walls. They watch at the gates for enlightened, pale-faced monarchs to arrive from star fleets and tread softly in the sunrise, conserving their strength for the shadow arts of legislature. But underneath, beneath your feet, deeper than the starfish's encrusted labor of sleep spell, the pipelines run black in carcass bone and hum privately with all the murmur of black stone. The pipelines course through cemeteries of crustaceans and they run faster than mineral in fresh water. They are speechless in their profounder equation, are silent as gods in the imparadised earthworks. This is a poem about private equity, and it has failed. It's been bought out by live screen cultures that manufacture brains at a bargain rate. It's been burned into a flash drive, buried somewhere in Taos, New Mexico. And it waits, baked in the sun, for the bison to canvas through the opening of the fields, the lengthening of shades, who refer to you as wind on glass, who whisper, grass leaf, grow, grow again. Okay, so now I'm going to read a series of poems, very short poems that are upcoming soon, published sort of in a sort of chapbooky kind of way. I can't reveal too much, but basically it's the new work that I've been working on for a bit. It's called Black Box Syndrome. I make mention of something called the Nawali, the Nawa. Actually, I might as well. And that's what I reference. Okay, Black Box Syndrome. I'm going to just read excerpts. Scene: Black Cube in Gardens. Two Nawali drag the horizon from its zoning laws, as if there were calendrical egrets dancing in the sun's lip, like a wound in cold fusion. Business as usual in the flatland. Amphore of carnage, ripe for picking, does not mean anything. That the stars are not unlike your dexterous remembrance. Our shapes dusted of fulcrum and forgetting. A viral horizon wipes the discords of their contaminants as we breathe airs of soft architecture, and my head is placed on my collar of bone and my organs. 1. A flux of changes to the time frame disjoints the specter on its flight plan. But I am here inside the lung, attuned to frequencies of wind pattern. It startles me how the evening bleeds the day of blood on a quiet street. A tongue of indifference strokes the inertia that settles in each behavior, solid as pungent smoke in humid arbor. It smells my edge of shadow. An ambuscade deforms my shapeliness, and I leap into the milpa to hide. 3. The heirloom weaves its theory. They can't sculpt the clay in wind. Did you ever remark how the objects in the world disappear in the cracks? A black box sutures them, a zipper that tenderly seals the lip. Other things need explanation, like the anatomy of a derivative. Magic is in the can opener, and yet we do not see its violence. Our theory of things is that we are submerged in radio wave and we sing. 5. I am waiting in the distant country. She is waiting in a letter. The child is waiting to receive the letter, but a grammar of cages prevents its syntax to formulate an understanding beyond what the body needs in a privation of technologies of self, clean water, soap, walls, waiting for distant relations to arrive, and paper, and a system for paper. The world is too much with us, too much, because it consists in enclosure. 7. Birds in the magnetic fields spell evil of pristine liquidity, black ink and clean spearmint. The heirloom might be outside. I feel my brain sweat within when I hear my own breathing. A man named Bill worms inside the mine's encampments. Mezcal is nothing like this. These shakes, this gouty toe, festering throat. There should be a syntax for avian flu to guard against noia. 8. Let the breast be full of sincerity as the earthenware of black soil, a gesture toward univocality, something like an inward mind turned soft from pigmentation and distilled in kith and cabbage and fish gut. There must be people out there beyond the kiting of my heart, of what constitutes the palaver in a sequence of migrant geese, while I lie here in the milpa and stare out in a teachable silence. 9. A return from an exile of cunning and kaleidoscopes of tauromachy. The scientist fake news the fashionable idea of electrical fascination, as if anything electrical automatically meant the mesmeric. But what's really happening is that Sisyphus doesn't understand what's happening, and a strap beneath is slowly removed, and a strap beneath him is gradually removed, and a strap under you is gracefully removed. 13. The Nahual hides its arms in thick grass under various moons of inquest. A brother animal breathes in the machine vapor and asks the blood of a running brook offer to spill its red black over stones broken by light. In the Red East, they say the belated one married her who opened the box. My tonali returns me to him, and he is me in the undercurrent. A narrative of miscreancy is common where the yoke of the sun splatters. 14. They are in love with narrative and large wagons, custom built for largesse. The poem is a machine which should make sense and carry loads. The black box is a machine which should contaminate the air with feeling, the dementia like the aroma of miklan and the gushing of pomegranate seed. Our wrapped faces in the screen time, in nature the eagle gourd's washed heart. He wondered of the wandering tribes who still speak inside disorientation. 17. The purple sun extinguishes on the remains of a cane toad. The consulting firm instructs us to ingest it during company retreats. A crisis of management might be offset by opioids of fact-checking. Object permanence quakes. Their eyelids blink in sedation. What is an individual under the lens of closed-circuit telepathy, or the adherence of red poppy seed, smooth like saliva on skin? And these are the last two. 25. How do we know it is documentary or nonfiction? How do we split hairs on this magnitude if we are bacteria on a God's fingernail? How do boxes work at sunrise or dusk? How do we know the cat is alive or in my brain? How does the Internet of Things work versus the world of things? If the doorbell rings, why do they need to see my face looking out at its face if the door is locked? But in my fantasy, it is always unlocked. And went down to the white world and glimpsed the savage Elysians, a declining sun equally brilliant, in lengthy shade of its demise. If he could be controlled by a tube, he wouldn't have it any other way. Espionage and mind games and poetry keep a same energy in what's visible at the heart of situations. Yet the interzone exists at all because time is the evil and our creationisms are fictions on the box. Thank you, everyone.
Wow, thank you so much. So yes, please, Steven, over to you. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Jose-Luis. That was chingon, my friend, as always. Hard to follow you, buddy. All right, well, everyone, I think I'm gonna do 3 poems. So let me start my clock. And I'm gonna start off with a poem from my book, the Codex Mojaodicus. This is the first poem I ever read in public. And it's kind of a funny story. Basically, it was this contest for Times Square to write a poem about Times Square. And my grandpa had just died. And basically I had this idea that what it would be like if I dumped my grandfather's ashes in Times Square. Well, so I submitted the poem and I won. That's the shit. That's the crazy part. They even give me $1,000, y'all. But then the place where I read it was in the middle of Times Square. So I was in that big ass TV. Like, it was wild. So anyway, first time I ever read was in Times Square. It was about this poem. But I think by the very end, when I read the poem, I felt like I shut the shit down. You'll see what I mean. So this poem is from the Codex Mojaodicus. This poem is called 2008, Fifth Sun, Our Present. And so Theo Pancho and Charlie penetrated Manhattan, deep, sloppy July humidity tangling them until times is square, as Theo used to say, though we'd never been. And so is Sinaloa and destiny linked with web to this eastern place. And so Charlie Chastateas would dump his Theo's ashes wherever he thought best, here in times is square. Charlie looked down at his Theo's new shell, then he said, but oye, listen, oye, and look, Theo, la luz, said Charlie through his Theo, whom he toted in black plastic sack, cinched at top, and how long and hidden, Dio and his dreams follow clinking cloud, rolling curtains, gas, green, neon, billowing, crowd furrowed, strange brows. Pues, mighty torrent, crowd shores its might, and cálmate los huevos, Dio, hush your thunder, said Charlie, clearly speaking his Dio de los Muertos, Pancho shun what's common and mean, 6,982,488 lights flashing fury, thought bulbs, and another 6,982,488, and noise, and his Dio from beyond, para el tiempo to boot, and these lines, cosmos, black, blanket, star, speckled nebulae, constellations of sun. Len yo, hasta Charlie to the folks exiting planet Hollywood and to some 50-foot tall, pouty-lipped, pyrite white being. Oh, Theo, away, alone, along on 42, Charlie walking solo west with Theo's ashes in this plastic sack. Watchale, walking Theo's ashes north past Swatch, hug sideways, oh servicio, here Theo, here time's money, Theo, Charlie said to his uncle's ashes sack cinched, time, movement, and Manhattan, time metaphor, said Charlie to his uncle's ashes of movement don't exist, bueno, buckle no arrow, buckle no fleeting sense. And Charlie Chastateas reckoned here in Nueva York, lights, and folks who ask C for money and say, B2B, what's in that bag, boss? And can I get some? And C, no, es mi tío en esa bolsa. Basta, and no forever sus primos no tiene su papá, not now, no forever Charlie, and the body just disappears, becomes dirt. Well, his ashes anyway, never to have visited times a sweat of blood mixed with his flesh. Oh, Theo, dead, evil in his politicking, fascista como Ezra Pound, racist Theo, fearful Theo, hatred, hard-hearted contra women, immigrants, LGBTQ, all ethnicities, evil Theo of different worlds, really refracted big time, and he wanted times a square? No manches, he died from self-hatred, self-pity, self-dread. All these lights, Charlie looked up, always electric day here in this place. Charlie needed a dark place, and he eyed a green flower pot, sweat in his eyes, pot over yonder, and he said to the box, there are 2 things in this dirty, dirty world. Up he looked at groups of students chaperoned by working class folk from Whack Museum, snapping plastic selfies, visible through the window. 2 things, brute facts and social facts, Theo. Brute facts exist without us. Charlie, still speaking to the cinched bag, but objects in relation to time after lantern yard, loss of Quetzalcoatl, absence of meaning, and Charlie speaking faster, rambling, gravel row, space without time, repetition instead, cyclical time. Hello, Quetzalcoatl, I order you time, universe, time, square, stop! And nothing. Look, deal. Here he spoke to the ashes in the box. Shells. All right, that's poem number 1. And there's a siren outside because I live in freaking New York City, y'all. That's how it is. All right. So this next poem, so a lot of my shit I write is weird. You can kind of tell. So the other two I'm going to read are more easier to follow, I guess. So this one was actually my father and I in 2009. We went to Sinaloa, Mexico, to go find where my grandfather basically abandoned his family during the Mexican Revolution. My grandfather had 3 different families. One in Mexico that he left, another family on the way to United States, and then another family in the United States. And my dad was the one that was on this side of the border. And we're trying to find out what the family way over there on the other side and find out a little bit about the mystery about why he did what he did. I'm not going to read the whole thing. It's called Return to Tetaroba. I'm going to start off on part number 5 and just go from there. So starting off with number 5. We found the cemetery first, the Panteon. My father had been researching genealogy, and he wanted to confirm speculations about dates and why my abuelo Francisco abandoned his family in Sinaloa. Perhaps abandoned is too strong a term, why he migrated and never returned. Whatever the word for that is, that's what he did. We confirmed that many Alvarezes still live in Tetaroba. In fact, Los Alvarez had their own section in the Panteon. A couple strolling the cemetery after leaving fresh flowers stopped to chat with us. Friends of our family, we learned, and they gave us directions to where we could learn more about ourselves. Also showed us around the Panteon, and we experienced ceremony, not abandonment, but lived lives that stretched transnationally and returned to earth more amazingly red than I had never known. 6, light that day bright, and the air hot, and meeting bones of those I would never know in the Panteon, speaking Sinaloan Spanish, which has always been the accent I've understood most despite hearing at least in my life. Our guide said, for Dia de los Muertos, the Panteon breathed generations sufficient to celebrate and hear. Stop, they said, you know this name, you know her name. You know her name, Father. You know her name. Say her name. Say Rosario. Rosario. 7. Rosario, la primera esposa de mi abuelo. Rosario, who waited for Francisco to never return. Rosario, who never married again. Rosario, who is now my grandmother. Rosario, grandmother to the vibrant Alvarez of Sinaloa. Rosario, whose name Los Alvarez in Arizona never knew. Rosario, whom Francisco abandonó. Yes, abandoned. Rosario, who knew of Francisco's second wife in Arizona and 2 children from her. Rosario, who knew of that wife's death during her 3rd childbirth and later of Francisco's 3rd wife in Arizona and 3 more children. Rosario knew of these 3 final children, but never knew their names. Rosario never knew my father, the oldest child of this 3rd family, never knew his name, nor mine, nor care I suspect. 8. We walked further into the pueblo proper, the deposito where the gente buy beer in Tetaroba, owned by Los Alvarez. Claro que sí, I was proud, and here I met the history of my father's family and half of who I am, with ice-cold chelas, loosening the Spanish of my humid United Statesian tongue. El Señor Nalo Lopez spoke of the history of Tetaroba, and indeed he remembered Francisco. He knew the lives lived in crumbling homes of those who went al norte. He saw nopales growing from my father's forehead and from mine mesquites, with roots that dig deep into deserts that defy borders. 9, abandoned homes preserved and what stood of memories of people who inhabited the spaces of Tetaroba, Sinaloa. Touch these walls, red adobe walls, my primo said, walking me from my days. Touch these adobe walls, they were the same your grandfather felt. You feel the heat they breathe hot. Indeed, Senor Nalo knew of Francisco's home, what was left of his home. Sígame, he said, follow me, we must walk. Roads and paved lined with stones and dust, so much dust, polva of airborne bones and saguaro ancestors watching us, their shadows trailing us as Senor Nalo led us past a dried creek and just over a small hill, and there a house with no doors. And there, attached to this home, the red walls of another, walls covered in hot black plastic secured with rope. There, the walls of Francisco's home. What was left of Francisco's home, now a storage space for another family's home. 10. Aquí vivió, Senor Nalo said. He lived here. Rosario, after decades of waiting, left this home and lived with her children when Francisco never returned. And yes, here, the fruits of Francisco's 3rd family in the USA found ourselves here, frente a frente with echoes of the faces of Francisco's children from his 1st family, closer to the center of El Rancho Tetaroba. How Los Alvarez of Arizona dwindled to less people over 100 years, and how Los Alvarez and Tetarubbe increased and lived in all parts of Mexico. And these walls of Francisco's old house crumbling to earth, red, red earth, touch these walls, Senor Nalo said, touch these walls, your abuelo's home, yes, the color colorado. They were the same your grandfather felt. You feel the heat they breathe hot, touch these walls, paredes en el frente, en mente. They were the same your grandfather felt. You feel the heat they breathe hot. I pocketed a piece of this wall, and later when drunk, way drunk after getting to know mis primos better over more chelas, I stumbled into the hotel, hot tears in my eyes. Dad, I said, I kept this for you, for all of us, but always for you, to keep him, to remember, always remember what he did to her. Earlier, when hiking back from the adobe walls, climbing down the drainage of rayed rock, sweet minted plants, Robert, my father, father of 5, all born in Arizona, Robert stops to catch his breath, then rips bamboo from the root, clouded rest, red dust clumps dropping. This is where he was born, and now we know why. Now we know why, and now we can see why. Okay, so that was poem number 2 by my old man, Robert, the Jefe. So, hey, y'all, you know Mother's Day is coming up. I know, cabrones, don't forget your moms. Las jefas. Mexicans, we call our moms the jefas sometimes, the jefes, or the dads. So I write this poem. This one's from my moms. I did one for my dad, my grandpa. This one's from my mom. This is for all the moms out there. How about that? This one I call La Jefa. And I wrote this poem a long time ago when I was probably, I want to say about 22. And I just found it the other day. And I was thinking, well, you know, I'm doing this poetry thing, so maybe I'll read this one too. And it's a little, I did a little things, I fixed a few things, but anyway, I'm gonna read this one. This was called La Jefa. And that means quite literally the boss. So we call the moms the boss. La Jefa smiling, her gummy smile smiling with all her soul, smiling that smile into me, my gums, those teeth, my teeth, she raised me, she bore me. La Jefa wants to be smart for me, closes her eyes for me, uses big words in English to please me, knowing that reminds me she needs me to listen. And as I turned her away, shut her mouth and nodded, antidepressant specialist lectured La Jefa, seeming attempted, lifted her head, that loyal Jefa would never let her babies, understanding no scientific jargon of brain impulse restriction and imbalance dependence, El Jefe, asleep next to her, he's the only genuine in the family, fought her eyes falling, wanting me to see she can be one of those educados. She'll fight her accent, prove to those who said she was never better than her, who were never beaten by their ex-lovers, battered by their heritage, who don't remain silent as stones, who can see things in words, who are better than most Mexicans who don't have excuses to cry. You don't have to clean offices at night, who don't have to care for the children of others to live. She obeys to send her boy to school to be one of those educados. La Jefa says, I'm better than her. I'm not. La Jefa's real. I'm not. La Jefa's better. Her smile, she hurts. Her wrinkles on the back of her neck hurt. Her old knees hurt and buckle, wrinkles around her eyes. Her fist she cannot clench, hurts. Once after work, after tagging along with her to the DES, first cleaning job she had, she searched the bottom of her bolsa for change, bought me a dilly bar from Dairy Queen, pack of Pall Malls, a bottle of Coors for El Jefe, a Triangle drive-through liquor, and nothing for herself. More than once, she forgot herself. La Jefa told my hermana one day she was afraid of me because I make her words not hers, that I can twist English into evil, that my education distances us, reverses the power and admiration, that everything I say is smart to my advantage. Yet my words fail to go home, go to resent blood, go to old eyes, brown mirrors reflecting me white. And for that, I say, fuck poetry. That's it. Thank y'all. I'm gonna stop with that one.
Thanks, Steven. That was Steven Alvarez. And now over to you, Anthony Cody. This is a great reading. Thank you so much for doing this.
All right, thank you so much, Lisa. Jose-Luis, Steven, appreciate you both. I just want to acknowledge that today I'm reading from the traditional lands of the Yokuts and Mono people here in what is now Fresno, California. I pay my respects to our native elders, both past and present. And I ask each of you to also do that work, honor your elders, native in our history, in our ancestors. I'm excited to be here today with everyone and sharing poems. I thought about what would I share, thinking about Codices, of the Borderlands. And I thought, I'm going to share some big poems today. So I'm actually going to start with poems from my book that open up my book. They're all centered around my time and experience of trying to get a passport photo. And an old white man asked where I was running to. So obviously I was running nowhere. I was just trying to travel. And due to the political climate, instead of doing something different, I decided to write a book, which is one part my own history, one part my grandfather's history, one part our collective history of living in the Southwest, and a big helping of all of the violences that occurred after the Trio of Guadalupe Hidalgo against Mexican and Mexican Americans, and how it keeps on happening. So I'm going to share my screen with some of those poems, and we will go from there. So this first poem is titled "Standing in Line to Take a Passport Photo. An old white man looks at me and claims I am running. Standing here because my grandpa ran away from home to sell perfume in El Zócalo at 9. In line, I am a lot of things. And since I am a lot of things, I am everything he cannot imagine. A passport photo asks me to 2x2 myself and capture what I am in neutral. And I recall I have yet to see the chambers of my heart turn tusk. An old white man is not Gil Scott-Heron saying, because I always feel like running, not away, because there is no such place, is not how you pronounce exile or escapar. Looks at me how Teddy Roosevelt died coveting a white buffalo. Claims I am afraid. No, I am a wall. No, I am a mirror. I am still so still. I'm going to read 3 of these. They kind of cascade from one another, so you'll notice the repetition. Standing here because my grandpa ran away from home to sell perfume in El Zócalo at 9. Standing in la caravana del hambre, agarra el sombrero, un ángulo del hombro, fuga en la calle. Here because the static in the airwaves remains a backbone, crackling in a shadow the daylight cannot remember. My grandpa ran away after his father died, followed his brother, the Lourdes, named after childbirth, and later murdered by his grandson, who hung himself in prison. Unable to await trial, a vigilance committee dangling. Ran away from home. The soundless gasp unpeels sky. To sell perfume, conceal the juncture, masquerade the way, vetiver, rose hips, cedar wood, lavender. The way across is not the path into. Clove, chamomile, bergamot. The trench without space. Sandalwood, palm rosa, geranium, sage, tooth, an aperture underneath. In El Zócalo, kukuru kuku, until mother means Michoacán, then kukuru kuku, leaving to cross San Isidro. At 9, trade all the pencils owned for a pocket knife at school, etched on the handle, a Labrador growls at a pheasant. Gift this to your mother for weeks. Scrape scavenged lead into sentences, graded. That also brings in the theme of Mother's Day. Hi, Mom. I know you're out there watching. This next is still part of the series. A passport photo asks me to 2x2 myself and capture what I am in neutral. And I recall I have yet to see the chambers of my heart turn tusk. A passport photo should be mailed to the federal government with my birth certificate, and I wonder if they will return. Consider the power of printed paper. 2x2 myself. A neat shape, raises no questions, and tells you no lies. Capture what I am in neutral. I have yet to see a sunrise in the shadow or a child birth itself from the inside of a Joshua tree. And this does not mean it is not possible. The chamber of my heart is a quiet, the outside of a pulse driving into a fire. Turn tusk, turn dusk, turn day, turn lengua, turn franca, turn español, turn sombra, así, atrás, ahí, acá, to here. Yes, here. Yes, here it is dark. This next poem is actually something that doesn't exist in real life. It's kind of piecemealed in the collection in Borderland Apocrypha, the book, because in real life, it's actually 4 feet by 4 feet. It's a full spread of a newspaper. The San Francisco Chronicle decided to document the quote unquote savage native. And then below is the very organized lynch mob. So I'm going to zoom in a bit and I'll read this. The accompanying figures are portraits of the native population in these districts. 2 of them are women in humble life, and the third is a porter carrying baggage across the isthmus. "200 of the most respectable citizens forming the Committee of Vigilance. Certain travelers who have visited California have reported the country to be strangely deficient in natural beauty, a statement which the accompanying view goes far to refute. More orderly than we ever recollect." So now I'll read the poem. Not knowing one's place, paying attention to white women walking towards others, conflict over land, competing, walking downstairs. The penalty of retribution, giving refuge to outlaws, fighting, give aid to an outlaw, the theft, banditry, train wrecking, drugs, killing a cow, threatening to kill Anglos, earning a living, herding sheep, bill collector, selling CDs, selling Lucy's, elotero, bracero, not doing your job, refusing to play music for Anglos, exercising First Amendment, protesting, shouting Viva Diaz, witchcraft, attempting to prevent lynching, refusing to cooperate with Vigilance Committee, breaking vigilante vow of silence, protesting the killing of a Mexican, supporting Western construct, encouraging Mexican Anglos to marry, word of mouth, rumor of past, being thieves, informers, spies, and murderers, perception, mistaken for outlaw, being of desperate character, driving, taking Anglo to court, riding the passenger seat with riding in the passenger seat, living on your land, using phone. So let's stop that for a second. So these poems are large. These poems get bigger and bigger. And once I finished this book, the poems kept getting bigger and bigger. And I kept trying to understand why my imagination is like pushing across the page, pushing across the border, pushing across the margins of the page and wanting to find and invent a new page. So for the second part of the reading, I'm going to actually share new work. And it's a big piece of work. It's actually 7 feet. And the new work also engages with the archive. But what it's doing and asking is asking us to consider climate, to consider the ways in which we're complicit, the way in which the earth is warming. And I'm going to read across the center of the poem, which can be read in multiple directions. And I'm going to share a video that is some Dorothea Lange archival photos from her time working, documenting the Dust Bowl, but also stills from the scroll. And while that's playing, I'll read. And midway through, I'll stop. I'll play a soundscape and I'll explain that while I stop. And this video has no sound. This is a trend line of the temperature in the United States from 1918 to 2018, 100 years. This is the peak. This is the beginning of the Dust Bowl. Someone will say that the Dust Bowl's in the past, and that is true. Someone will say we should bury the past, or the future is now. But really what they're saying is move onward and upward. And really, that's all cliche. How an uncle tells me my grandmother is in a better place, which could be a lot of things. Water break. How an uncle tells me my grandmother is in a better place, which could be a lot of things, but mostly the hope is to pacify. The trend line is moving up, and in a state of current economies is combusting. It combusts. Actuaries to see these peaks are now off the page at the present day. This is a real chart. The same way an actuarialist is an expert in determining uncertainty and risk, and in the state of current economies, reward. The actuarialist studies the life expectancy of both financial and the living things leaning upon the financial things. And if we are about that life expectancy, we really are saying that people are looking at how we will live and how much living we'll do while alive. And if so, what does a future life look like with a trend line that continues ascension? A futurism of expanses finds a cliff and recedes. Unlike the rivers and lakes and oceans, a futurism of invention, not of brilliance, but from the necessity of survival. Someone will say survival is the necessity of invention. Now I'm going to stop this video and I'm going to share a sound clip that is actually part of this poem. And I recorded it following what would be 6 months without rain here in Fresno, California. And it also incorporates an audio recording of a study around the adaptations we must make for climate that has been called the climate report that sends people to therapy. It's titled Deep Adaptation, and it's read by the Professor Bendall, who also did the study. Let me actually stop because I didn't share sound.
What are the valued norms and behaviours that human societies will wish to maintain, will fear as they see in I know you may have little time and space for reinventing systems of holding the norms of the current society. But our ideals and civilization eroded when I question why indeed it is impossible. How do we keep and to attempt really would be to assume we are in relinquishing ourselves calculated what do we need to let go of? I have dubbed this the deep adaptation and restoration assess. What systems bring back denial to help us with defeating the sense of doom, inevitability, the deep adaptation agenda? I know you may have little time and space for reinventing when I question why I was even writing this.
I'm going to go back to sharing that video. And I'll read the rest of this poem. A, we listen to the voice sculpture, Deep Adaptation. B, we listen to the voice sculpture again and write. C, we will remember the sound of the chimes. D, will you be able to write in the shape of those chimes? E, what is value? What do you value? F, what can you relinquish? Have you tested your grip strength? G, when was the last moment that something was pulled from your hands? H, in the deep adaptation, how will you tell the tangible goodbye? I, have you considered the taste of water uncontaminated? J, if you could cleanse and decontaminate one aquifer, would it be the one you drink from or the one the most populated drinks from? K, in the deep adaptation to climate change, I might not be rhetorical. So which aquifer would you choose? L, what about the people drinking from the aquifers that are now contaminated or completely dried out? Which is worse? M, Would you fight a man for the last bottle of milk for a baby? And have you considered the ways in which your footprint, both literal and figurative, can be negated? O, are you still reading? P, are you still listening? Q, have you considered how a family tree stops growing? R, how will you communicate when the cooling systems for all the internet server farms run out of water? S, what is post-internet? T, who is in control? U, are you there? Thank you.
Wow, Anthony, thank you so much. Wow. See, for tiny things, Zoom actually works brilliantly. That worked brilliantly. Thank you. I'm so glad tech held up for that. Thank you so much, Jose-Luis and Steven and Anthony. That was a fantastic reading. I'm so glad to have heard you all. If anyone has questions, it's hard to see you all, but you could ask questions in the chat and then we can unmute you and you can ask questions if you have anything to discuss other than how incredibly amazing the readings were. Thank you. But we have, a few minutes if you want to ask questions, ask and I'll unmute you. I have a tiny startup question. Anthony, what you read, the scroll is new work. How are you thinking forward to presenting that? Is that going to be published, gallery?
Yeah, it's a series of other things. I also have like a 9-foot by 27-foot mural poem that would only potentially exist on a mural like projected at night kind of thing. In like trying to think through publishing and other things, I've also created a series of annihilation strategies after Brian Eno, and thinking about how that could be like cut up and then assembled and it becomes participatory. The climate and annihilation is something that we're all partaking in. In terms of the scroll, definitely both of those I thought about gallery exhibitions with like soundscape and sort of a place that you have to navigate the poem. So that's definitely something that I've like been thinking of, like print, online, gallery, and one-time event.
Okay, yeah, that all makes total sense. The
annihilation. And then all of that kind of stopped once I was in the middle of working on it, and then the pandemic, and now I don't even know. The mural is actually a coughing mural, and I don't even know if that's too soon. So I don't.
That's so interestingly relevant at the same time. That's so cool. Wow. Jose-Luis, I had a question for you about the Feta poem, if that was in one of the books you've already published, or if that's new work. I lost track of it. I loved that piece in particular, and I want to track it down. So where do I track it down? And can you, yes, okay, great. You're unmuted.
Yeah, thank you, Lisa. Thank you as well, Anthony, Steve. I mean, that was just incredible, mind-blowing. It was quite an honor to just experience both of your works. I guess to answer the question, it's in this book, in Place Discipline. So okay, that's where the theta is. I do have a question actually to add of my peers here. So I was wondering actually, because I mean, part of the logic behind the at least the way it was conceptualized is this notion that I'm sort of thinking through, especially through both of your work, about the Codex and the Borderland, what I'm calling the Borderland mythos, right? As a liminal space, as Ansaldúa says, a quatly Q state, in which certainly there's a suspension, right? And a pluralization of the self, and in terms of what we understand as place. So I'm interested in this kind of the figure of the Codex, right? As something that documents history, that and this is you know, a question to Steve. First of all, you know, the image of the Codex, the figure of the Codex is something that captures history, that documents history, but often also is an act of colonial violence, of erasure. So, for instance, when you're thinking of the Aztec codices or the Maya codices, that there's this superimposition and often a palimpsestic quality to how one history is layered over another, often at the expense of what preceded it, right? So I'm interested about the Codex as this paradox, right? In terms that it's trying to record history, be a document, but at the same time is erasing it. And then to Anthony, the sort of the Borderland mythos, right? The apocryphal events that Anthony's book sort of narrates, right? And brings from the margins into the center, and how that's actually captured in the kind of multimedial, in this kind of wonderfully paratextual kind of this beautiful performativity of all of these texts sort of layered upon each other, but still in some kind of unity, right? They still kind of sing, especially through the way that you use audio and visual components. That has this kind of liminality, right? Where it sort of plays across different states that I think reflects the border. So I guess, Steve, if you don't mind answering like about the figure of the Codex, and Anthony maybe about the mythos of the Borderland and its apocryphal nature.
Oh, all right. Let me see here. Well, I guess maybe the best part for me to think about is that when I study literacy, that's what my research is in. And when I started reading more about the history of literacies in Mesoamerica, and it was, I guess, the larger idea where the Europeans thought they brought literacy to the Americas and just sort of dismissed what was already happening here in terms of communicative practices, poetry, songs, rituals, everything that was recorded, records that had been extensive for generations. In fact, they saw what was, well, not even, I guess they would consider written and considered it evil and just burned it right away. And of course, people were jumping on the fires to preserve all these libraries, really. And so anyway, but it's a bit more complicated than that. I mean, it's to say that these were the ancient texts of the Americas. I mean, the work of the Americas distinct from anywhere else from Europe or Asia. This was the text that were, I mean, the Popol Vuh is like the Bible of Mesoamerica, and it is of the Americas. So these Mesoamerican poetics really intrigued me, partly getting it through the history of literacy. But then it's even more complicated than that. Of course, the Aztecs did the same thing. They're an empire as well. So they also rewrote the history of the people they conquered and also took parts of their histories as well and metamorphosed in this kind of way. So to me, I think of the codices, of course, as recording conquests in all different kind of levels, but also as a sort of like a living document. And they're always living, but they always have the potential to be destroyed or partially recovered. Pieces of them sometimes subsist, sometimes only in the oral tradition and get recorded later, misremembered, misrecorded, have all the records from everything from prophecies to how to make the right cup of chocolate. I mean, they're just so incredible. And so for me, with my book, it was trying to create the idea that there was a codex that was telling a story, that was a prophecy that was found way before, but it was also repeating and reliving, but also in the same way, I was trying to imagine James Joyce imagining a post-colonial Ireland with Europe or England in the background, but also something related to the history of Europe. I was trying to imagine like a Stephen Dedalus figure in the Borderlands who didn't have to look to Europe, but could look to the traditions of Mesoamerica and the texts that were there. So that's the figure for me. But then the Borderlands, like you said, it was the place and the space where those battles came face to face, but it's also where I grew up. And I think that was my Dublin in Tucson. I don't think of it that way. So anyway, that's a great question, my friend. Thank you.
I like that. That was my Dublin, Tucson. You know, when I think about Borderland Apocrypha and all like the archival, apocryphal kind of elements of like the violences that were happening against Mexican and Mexican Americans, and how easy it was to like destroy those narratives and destroy, not only destroy them, but like disperse them in sort of like a, like a Koyo Shalki kind of moment where this is all of our entity, that what we are, and then suddenly it's just dispersed everywhere. And so much of this research, like I would see things here that would line up here, but then also because they had been torn or misremembered or misconstrued or reframed in the larger narrative of like popular media, like they don't even fit, right? They don't even fit back up. So like so much of like the visual work and trying to dive into the archive is like trying to visualize not only that journey, but also trying to like help guide the reader to find their own connection in that fragment. Because I mean, people have asked me like, oh, this is, how do you read it? How should I read it? And my answer is always like, how do you want to read it? Because that's how we enter into the archive. That's how we enter into these histories, and we tell them and we learn from them, but also it's there for you to figure it out too. And so it's like, yeah, I lay the crumbs there for you to go along with me, but also I know that I only can do so much. And you know, you as the reader have to take that other part in this navigating this place of the borderland, literally this imagined area that you're going to have to cross back and forth over, across languages, across the margin, back and forth across the pages, and how that is like personified, like embodied really, that movement and that motion, or the eye.
Wow. Yeah, great questions, Jose-Luis. Thank you. Thank you for the answers. A tiny side thing that is in many ways irrelevant, but also poetic. The subtitles we have going have translated some of your words in some weird ways. It consistently decides that Borderlands is actually the word Wonderland, although this time it got it right, but frequently comes up with Wonderland as the sort of typed word, which is quite weird and surreal. And Steve, during your poem dedicated to your mom, what is the word? It's like Haifa.
Oh, Jefa. It kind of, I mean, it's kind of, I mean,
okay.
I mean to say it sounds like heifer, but
I know that's what the blasted transliteration thing is coming up with, and it's really offensive. So I'm just trying to figure out what the actual word is.
No,
I knew it had to be something. Yeah.
My mom will give me the chancla. She finds out that's what they do. Like,
totally. I'm not telling her. No way.
No.
I've actually been.
I'm sure she's not watching, so don't worry.
Yeah. Well, hopefully the subtitles won't screw with that too much, because that's a great piece. I really feel like there are so many spirits with you when you're doing these poems, Steve. They're just, thank you so much. I haven't found any specific questions in the chat, but if anyone has anything, speak now, because we're kind of wrapping up. We're at the end of our time, and thank you so much for coming to this event. It was just a wonderful, wonderful reading. And Sheila, where are you? Do you have audio, Sheila? Sheila wants to know if you've read Breaking the Maya Code.
Yeah, this is a great book. Actually, it's so interesting, the work that's being done on Mayan language. A lot of really great linguists that came out of Russia, especially.
Yes,
but like in the world of poetry, even someone like Charles Olson went to Mexico to go do that, and it definitely affected the visual identity of his work, and also where he was looking for mythology beyond Europe too. So definitely a very good book, and there's so much we can do with Mesoamerican poetics, and I would definitely encourage everyone, especially getting some of the work with like Ted Locke and some of the other folks too.
I've totally I actually have a story. I was at Fresno State's library in the before times with Juan Felipe Herrera, and he was like, man, you got to get down here. You're doing all this stuff. You have to come read this book. And so we go down, we're digging through the stacks of the library, and we get to this one aisle, and it's like, there's like cobwebs. It's like, half forgotten. And there he pulls out Michael Coe's book. And then I was like, oh yeah, I've like looked at it and read it, and like 20 years before you told me to read it, and I'm like, or like 10 years before that, or something like that. And it's like, oh my gosh, okay. So it's like all this big circular thing. But yeah, that's definitely something like I want to revisit. And I think Sheila, what is it? You're mentioning Signs of the Americas.
Yep.
There it is. Right here, I had it handy because actually Edgar was going to be on the panel originally, and instead you got stuck with me and my scrolls.
Oh no, whatever's.
We like
whatever's that was.
We were happy with scrolls, but yeah, Edgar's also fantastic. So, any other questions, or shall I just thank you all and Yeah, that was wonderful. Thank you. Really, really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Yeah.